That's the way to do it, man. If you're not jumping on the AI bandwagon and trying to figure it out, you're probably wrong.
Doing something incorrect.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to start off today's call by actually giving a little whoop whoop. First of all, Matt Spot here just gave us some positive news that he just got a deal under contract. I'm getting some weird feedback. Is that it? Is that the feedback?
Sounds like a squeaky chair.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. I think we got rid of it. Anyway, no, we still have it. There it goes. Matt got a deal on the contract. Matt, how many units was that? Was that 3 units? 4 units?
Yeah, this is a 3-unit deal.
3 units.
Yep, so that'll take me up to 45 now.
Seller carry. So no cash out of pocket. So that's exciting. Deals under contract. And if anyone else has any deals under contract, let me know. But also we just surpassed, and by just, I mean last week, but I was unable to be on the call with you guys on Thursday. So technically this is old news, but we just surpassed 50 people as a part of the mastermind. 50 students. We're a group of 50 going strong. So whoop whoop. Lots of people, lots of opportunity, lots of different markets, lots of different minds. I'm excited for what's to come with this group here. But anyway, that's my spiel. So what we're going to cover today is high level overview of a deal. Emphasis on the overview. Going to try to make this not like spending an hour on each individual topic, because we quite literally could, and we do, or we have. This is just supposed to be high level, hitting the main points. So instead of having to go back and watch an hour and a half long videos on each individual topic, you'll have one video that you can just get high level overview of the whole process.
Videos, but yeah, two
videos. This is going to be a 2-part series because there's a lot to cover. So one today, and then part 2 will be following Monday. Matt, you have the ability? There you go. Should be able to share your screen.
All right. So like Josh said, we're trying to wrap up what we're calling the beginner series, intro series, whatever you want to call it. This is part 4 of our 8-part planned series as of where we are now. We talked about creative financing overview from a basic level, got some in-depth there stuff as well. Talked about your personal business and talked about, real estate company structure specifically. And now we're getting into just a high level deal overview. We have a lot of questions, about, hey, how does I understand that, we need to make offers, but how does the offer and the letter of intent, how are those things connected? Or like, where does risk capital come into play? Or, at what point does asset management a thing? And so we're going to try to clarify that in this high level overview here. That's the intent. So just kind of deciphering this is more of the roadmap, the big picture roadmap, the 30,000 foot view of above the sky of the deals. And so I broke this down to be as simple as possible. An overview, guys, which is a noun, 3 syllables, overview. So it's a general review or summary of a subject, right? So this is the general summary of the subject we're going to go into. I'm not trying to go into the weeds. This is a 2-part series for the high level overview. This first 6 steps we're going to talk about today are going to be deal finding, deal analyzing, offering from an offer to a contract, effectively from LOI to contract. We'll talk about due diligence. We'll talk about lending requirements and deal structure. That'll be today's meat that we're talking about. The next Monday, when we talk with the beginner series, we're going to finish it up with 7 through 12, going through entity creation all the way through exit strategies. Being that we're going to try to keep this call to an hour, our intent is to have each one of these sections to be talked about 8 minutes or so, which should give us a good 10 to 15 minutes to clean up any high level questions at the end as well. So that is the overall view and intent getting in here. So no, not every question will be answered, because we're going to talk about hopefully every aspect of a deal, but at a high level today. All right, let's jump into it. The other thing I will highlight is we're going to try to illustrate or maybe emphasize or add a little bit more color to this by pulling in specific aspects of a deal that we've already accomplished and gone full cycle with. And so we'll be able to pull specific things, or if you guys have specific questions about, hey, what does this look like? We might be able to pull that up for you real time or at the end with your questions and answer, guys. All right. So the very first part of this whole concept of, a deal start to finish is going to be finding the deal, right? That's it. And so how do you find a deal to begin with? And we broke it down to a couple of these sections. The first thing is obviously building relationships. So by nature of you guys being in a group like this, honestly, that's one of the first steps into finding deals. I won't be surprised if, I don't even know if it's happened already. It might have happened already, where members of this group end up tackling a deal together.
Yeah, it's happened.
Okay, it's like, sweet. So just by nature of building relationships, whether it be around like-minded people or intentionally around people who are not like-minded, that's another way to go about it. Is to build relationships that will grow opportunities for you. So that is the really high level first step. Is relationships in this business are really everything when it comes to the deal finding aspect. And if you're trying to build organic lead generation in that sense. The next one's going to be broker networks, which are also going to be relationship building. We've talked high level before on this, to where Reggie and Josh, by nature of just their what they do in the day-to-day and the way that their personalities are set up, like they're very good at keeping in touch with brokers, and they're intentional about following up with brokers, because we want to stay on top of brokers' minds. Because if you want to equate this to like the flipping world, there's the wholesalers who generally bring the flippers the deals, right? And then the flippers flip the deals as the end game investors. The brokers are kind of like the wholesalers in the commercial real estate business, right? They're the ones who are there tracking down the deals, and they bring us the deals that we want to see if we can tackle or not. They get their assignment fee, they get their commission right at the end of the day. But that's kind of the way that works. When it comes to how do you build broker networks, we can definitely talk for an entire lesson on how to build broker networks. But the big picture here is being intentional, and just like the broker should be following up with you, realize the broker's job is not necessarily finding, their job is finding the end buyer, but their real value add as brokers is finding the deals. So they're going to spend 80% of the time trying to find deals that they can sell, rather than trying to spend 80% of the time finding buyers like us to buy the deals, right? The most important aspect of that is the actual deal finding itself, and that's the value that they bring to the table.
Hey,
so
Matt.
it's your job. Go ahead, Reggie.
Great example of that. About 30 minutes ago, one of the brokers that I engage with a lot called me, and we're working on an LOI for a property, but we've also done some other stuff together. I think he's toured one with me, but he said, "Hey, do you have anything you're looking to sell? I noticed you own this other property in Montgomery. Would you be interested in selling that?" And so he's calling me about one thing, but he's still like trying to generate leads. He's trying to find things to buy, or for other people to buy. So yeah, great example of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's broker networks. Next thing is going to be online sourcing. Everyone's heard of LoopNet, everyone's heard of Crexi, and those, while we say, hey, LoopNet are where deals go to die, there are deals that actually do happen on LoopNet. I mean, the deals that happen on Crexi, there's a reason that those things exist and that they're so prevalent. Now, not necessarily, I mean, it's a numbers game at that point, but one way you could find deals is through those prevalent online sources. The thing to realize that in the commercial real estate world, it's not nearly as organized as the residential real estate world, right? In the residential real estate space, we have our MLSs that are all kind of linked up together, and it's a very organized and rigid kind of process. In the commercial real estate space, it's much more fluid. They don't have that kind of, they don't have a very good centralized location for all of the deals and all the data, if you will. And so when you're looking at online sources, you need to realize that it's not just a single online source. There are multiple sources to reference, and there's going to be some that pop up in various spaces. And online sources also is going to be, linking to this, 2 bullet points down of social media platforms. I'll reference, LoopNet with just as much as being active on various Facebook groups or Instagram, following Instagram people, or, even TikTok people, or LinkedIn, like, Josh being big, heavy in LinkedIn. Deals are going to be found on every one of these sources. So you just got to figure out how you want to spend your time, and then be diligent with that follow-up and intentional with that follow-up, trying to find those deals. Property listings themselves, these are going to come from those online sources. Some are going to be off-market property listings. I can't tell you how many times someone sent me and said, "Hey man, I got this exclusive off-market deal." And you think like, "Oh man, I did it. I made it, man. They brought me the off-market deal. I am the investor who is getting the off-market deal from the broker." Like you feel like you made it. And then all of a sudden you realize that off-market deal has already slept with, 10 other investors, and you feel like you got sloppy. You're not getting sloppy seconds, you're getting sloppy like 20ths at this point, right? And so like when someone says they got a exclusive off-market deal with you, take that with a massive grain of salt. It is very, very often, if not 100% likely, that they've sent it to somebody else. So just know that when it comes to property listings. All right. The next thing we talked about real estate groups, just like this one, guys. If you can get involved as many free groups as possible, there are some fantastic free sources out there. And I'm a part of a lot of paid groups as well as free groups, and I try to add value where I can. You can burn yourself out being like trying to be involved in every group out there. So I would try to be intentional, pick what groups are really adding value to you. And the more you'll find, the more value you put into the group, you're generally going to get more value out and get more opportunities in those groups as well. So one small example from even actually the way that Josh and Reggie and I met for the first deal that we're talking about, the way we even linked up together at all is I was part of my local regional RIA, the Real Estate Investor Association, and we did a mastermind course from that RIA, break off separate mastermind course from the guy who was running the RIA. And it was just 6 of us that we met once a month over 6 months for commercial real estate. So it's a commercial real estate mastermind over 6 months. We paid, I don't know, $4,000 for, something like that. Now, this RIA, this mastermind, there were 6 of us in there, and the guy who was teaching the real estate, the mastermind, and one of the instructors was the one who connected Josh and Reggie with the very first deal that we got connected with. And they knew Josh and Reggie had a missing link, and they knew that I could be that link that we were missing. They connected us, and that's how we found each other. So we found each other by me being active in a group that they weren't even part of, but by being active, we were able to link together. So it worked out really well in that sense. Next one's going to be word of mouth referrals, which just kind of builds on everything else above that. And this is what we're going to try to bring up as an example. And the last thing is going to be direct to seller marketing. So if you guys want to play the role of the wholesaler and the flipper, if you will, the deal finder and the asset manager in this business, then you can do that. Just realize direct to seller marketing, meaning you're sending mailers out, you're doing cold calling to sellers. You have mail drops. So rather than like just sending blank postcards, you do your handwriting notes. You can do mass text blasting people. You can be doing bomb video campaigns. You can do like whatever you want. There's a ton of campaigns out there that you can follow up with, and that is an entire business in itself that you can do as far as deal finding. And don't get me wrong, there is more meat on the bones for the times you're able to go direct to the seller. Like our Brixton place, we were talking directly to the seller for Brixton place with that one, and we were able to have some really good negotiations. And when we had to with that one, we were negotiated. I think we went direct to seller Brixton place, right? Or I'm talking out my ass. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I thought that was the case.
Same thing for Citronelle and same thing for the RV park.
Yeah. So, and we didn't do any direct to seller marketing for any of those. I mean, they were all found through different sources, through everything else up here. Just realize there's that's kind of the big picture overview for deal finding in a nutshell. Josh, Reggie, what do we want to highlight for this one with the Citronelle deal specifically? We talked about how we got connected, but anything else we want to show the crowd?
Yeah, so this whole overview analysis here that we're covering is like a deal overview, right? So the specific deal that we're going to continue to reference is actually the first deal that we ever bought, called Citronelle Square, which we've talked about a handful of times, but really we just wanted to take the overview on this 2-part little series here and try to give direct real world examples of how we did specific things. So specifically how we found this deal was actually through my mentor at the time, Jeremy, which is what Matt was talking about, as the guy that introduced the 3 of us to ultimately become business partners on this deal. And so this was literally the email that he sent me back in, was this it?
Yep, September 2020.
I think it was another email.
No, well, this is the one where he says, "Hey man, hope everything's going well with Catherine Arms," which is we turned into Brixton place. He said, I own it currently. He's talking about, I have another potential deal for you guys. So this is the word of mouth sphere of influence. This is kind of everything coming together here, where he says, "Hey, but the ownership partnership is something that I need to get out of." So it was a classic partners aren't happy with each other, so they wanted to separate ways. And this is just the email, just to give you an idea of what this deal finding looks like in this specific deal. It was essentially an email because Josh was adding value and kind of leaning on a local guy with experience. I was leaning on a guy with local experience, and we just happened to be leaning on him from 2 different aspects, 2 different worlds and 2 different spheres. And this is how we got connected up front. So this is how Josh and Reggie found the deal up front, I should say. So that's it. So yeah, they were looking at another deal, but he said, "Hey man, I got headaches over here, and I full well would love to sell you this deal, basically." And there you go. He gives us the deal details. It's 42 units in Citronelle, Alabama. Here's some details. 34 of the 42 are rented to Airbnb. It's like, okay, sweet. And so they start their process from there. All right. And that's the deal finding overview. We'll hold questions until the end. If you guys do have questions at this point, feel free to throw them in the chat as well if you think something is important from the high level overview. Like I said, we're going to record this process and we're going to make sure this is part of like the onboarding for beginners getting into the course here. All right, next. So now that we found a deal, next part is going to be analyzing the deal, right? So you found the deal, and I'm like, what the hell do I do? This deal's in my lap. What am I going to do from here? We talked extensively. I won't say extensively. We talked fairly in depth last Thursday on a quick analysis for how to do what I call a manual analysis here, which would be that bigger filter to see if these deals are worthwhile. And then from there, you would jump it into the software solutions, meaning you would jump it into some preordained analyzer, whether it's, if Josh, Reggie, and I finally finish and polish off our internal analyzer that we want to give you guys, we're not quite there yet. You throw it into that. There's a Michael Blanc analyzer, there's Think Multifamily analyzer. There's a million analyzers out there, or you can create your own homegrown analyzer as well. But from there, you're gonna throw it in the analyzer. My recommendation is filter them first with some sort of quick manual analysis, whether it's a very simple Excel or it's just literally bar napkin math to figure out if it makes sense, and then from there throw it into your software solution. We talked at length in the advanced section at this point as far as market rates and market analysis itself. But from here, you want to understand what the rental assumptions are as you're analyzing the deal, right? What do market rates actually look like, truly, and actually look like? And what do occupancy rates actually look like? Is 97% occupancy a realistic, sustainable occupancy in this market? What are the population trends right now? If you guys are friends with me on Facebook, you can look at, I posted something on my stories today. Let me see if I can actually download it really quickly. I'll show you, because I thought little things like this to stay on top of make a lot of sense. And while I'm pulling this up, Josh, Reggie, if you want to talk about evaluating markets, I have one good graph I can show them on this other stuff. Let me see here.
You got anything, Reggie?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, there's a lot of fundamentals to look at, but if you're thinking about that market, the market equilibrium curve, where we're at, not right now, I think we're kind of in that slowdown headed towards the recession phase. You want to see like where occupancy rates are versus the long-term average. And then, for market rates, when you're looking at the property, you're looking at your competitors or the rent comps, and then you're looking at median household income to give you kind of an affordability, gauge or frame of reference. And so it's like, it's not just A plus B equals C. You're taking this constellation of data and you're trying to interpret it all. And there's better ways to do it. And we're trying to give the better way here. And so trying to give some color around some of that.
Yep. Yeah, and from there, what I threw here is primary, secondary, tertiary markets. The thing to highlight for this specific example, where we were in this deal, I'll just pull up in maps to show you guys. If you guys don't know where Citronelle, Alabama is, then you just clearly are not a smart person, right? Like everyone knows where Citronelle, Alabama.
There's BFE.
Yeah, dude. So when you talk about markets, we want to talk about major metros.
Population 4,000.
Yeah, population 4,000 people here. Citronelle, Alabama is right here. So we're northeast of Mobile by what, an hour and a half or so. And Mobile in itself, it's an MSA, right? It's a statistical area when it comes to that. But it's not a major metro, Mobile, Pensacola, they're both like cities, but they're nothing to write home about. The closest big metro is really, Birmingham, that's probably the closest big metro, I would say. But Mobile is what we went off of course, because it's very, very close. But you have primary markets, for first tier markets, but then you have secondary markets, which, a secondary market in my mind would be something like Pensacola, where it's like a city, doesn't really have a high rises, but it's got enough of a town to make sense. Mobile, I'd consider, a primary market. But then you got these guys up here where all you see is trees. When you go to Google Maps and you just see forest everywhere, like you're probably like, okay, this is a tertiary market, right? They got one street that everything goes off of, and beyond that, you're either in a mobile home or you're living on a farm. And that's a tertiary market. And what does that mean to me when I'm analyzing deals? Tertiary markets in general, they're going to look more favorable. They're going to look more savory because the cap rates are going to be higher because you're in this tertiary market. But the reason the cap rates are going to be higher is because these tertiary markets generally are going to introduce more risk into the game. It's harder to find good labor. And sometimes there's not even a specialist to do whatever you need to do. Like, let's say it's some random roof replacement, and you need to get someone from way down here in Mobile to come up there and replace it. Everything's going to cost more in that sense. Maybe these small towns all rely on a single employer that are going to be a big factor if that employer goes out of business. So like things like that, just consider based on the type of market you're in, it's going to increase or decrease your level of risk. It's also going to affect the cap rate, and these are all things you need to kind of throw into your analysis.
I would say the exit strategy too. If you're looking at a tertiary market and your exit strategy is ultimately to sell, then your buyer pool is going to be like nil. Like, there's not going to be many people interested in buying in a town population 4,000. So now the actual valuation at the sale is probably going to be lesser than what you initially had anticipated if it was something closer to a secondary or primary market.
Yep, 100%. So this is what I was trying to show you guys earlier as far as what gives you the warm fuzzy. And one more thing to look at. Right now, Florida, this is net migration by state versus percentage of population change over from 2021 to 2022. So where are people moving out of? Where are people moving into? This should not be a surprising chart to you. But Florida has had the highest percentage growth in the entire US and the highest population. So percentage-wise and population-wise, more people have moved to Florida than anywhere else in the United States. And you go the exact opposite, probably not a surprise that the most people, 343,000 have moved out of California. Percentage-wise, it's not a big percentage, but New York and Illinois, they've had a larger percentage hit. 1% out of New York has left the city or the state in 1 year. California about quarter percent or so. But Florida had a 2% increase in population growth. That's significant in 1 year. So things like that, just to keep yourself on top of understanding where we are with where was I? Occupancy rates and considerations in that regard. Okay, that's evaluating markets. This are primary, secondary, tertiary. We talked through that. And then this is also the point when you're starting to analyze deals where you're going to start to softly engage your lenders. And so this is where you're going to say, hey, Mr. Lender, I'm considering this deal. What might the terms look like? I know they're not going to be hard right now, but what might these terms look like if I were to make this deal happen? And they could, start to give you some soft terms at that point. Reggie, any other, when we talk about the initial lender interaction you want to kind of highlight there?
Well, hopefully by now you've developed some relationships with some lenders, so you can just call them up kind of nonchalantly. Hey, I came across this deal. I think we might get it under contract. What is debt looking like right now on something like this? Can I get a 20-year AM? Can I get a 25-year AM? What are her interest rates? Are there any prepayment penalties? Because the bank, they apply these, they have these internal things that they apply to different asset classes and whatnot, and they can share that with you, and it changes all the time. So it's a really good way to do some preliminary underwriting and kind of at least narrow down what your debt service might look like.
Yep, exactly. And then the last piece we talked about in depth when we were talking through T12 and lender docs previously in our advanced class, but I'll say it here just for the beginner series, is understanding that there are going to be biases in the information you begin in, right? There are definitely times where the T12 does not highlight certain aspects that should be reflected in the T12, where the rent rolls might be off, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. I mean, we're dealing with property managers that we've been on site for a year and they still don't have the damn rent rolls right, and we're the ones managing them. So like, it's not always an intentional mistake. Like, they're not intentionally trying to screw you sometimes. Just something to realize that data will be biased in all this, so take everything with a grain of salt. And to the software solution piece, this was our original analyzer, just to show you guys what this looks like. Citronelle original analyzer is what we labeled it as. We were using the Michael Blanc analyzer at the time, and that's our pro forma that we'll get to here in a second. But we were running, different scenarios overall to see. This is the quick analysis, just again, not to get into the weeds of an analyzer, but we would say, oh, I know this is probably super small for you guys. For the marketing package, so this is what they're marketing right now, and here's my version. So where do these kind of stand in? So this is what I would consider these two big columns here, what I would consider these are my analysis phase. And then we're going to get into what I want to offer, and that offer is going to be based on what I project. And so here's what I think here's what they're advertising. Here's what I think is realistic. Here's what my offer is going to be based on, and here's what I think I can get it to. Basically, is kind of the way I run these numbers. And down here, you know, in the analyzer itself, you're going to have a bunch of different analyzers. But you can see, you know, what are the different cap rates in these different scenarios? How does that drive my decision making? You know, if I were to sell at these various cap rates based on an assumed cap rate, what does the value look like? So big picture, just to show you guys, this was our original analyzer for this deal that we did take down and went full cycle with.
Those interest rates looked great.
Yeah, interest rates were way better back then. All right, here we go. Next, so now we analyze the deal. We found the deal, we analyzed the deal. Now it's the whole process of what does this look like? I found a deal I really like. Dude, I'm excited now. Like Matt, who just got these 3 under contract, like, dude, I'm super pumped for you, man. Now, what does it look like though in the commercial multifamily space to go from a letter of intent all the way through contract now? So the initial one, let me show you our LOI. So Josh, you want to talk about crafting an LOI while I pull it up?
Yeah. So we have basically a template LOI that we use every time. Super simple, super easy. You change the date, you change the name of the property and the address you're looking to target. Of course, you sign it. And then you put in your actual terms of what it is you're actually looking to submit this offer specifically on. And we've talked about this a couple of times. Some people like to submit multiple offers. Some people like to submit just a one offer. It's to each their own, deal specific on how you actually want to craft that. I was under the assumption that if you gave people options, they liked options. But when we had Jason come to actually talk to us, he said he actually doesn't like when he gets multiple offers in one LOI from one particular buyer, because he feels like then they don't know what they're doing and they're not as professional, which was a very interesting data point that I had never thought of. So anyway, it's something to think about, but super simple. This is the way that we had constructed it. I think we've tweaked it briefly since, but at the end of the day, if you want to know what our actual LOI looks like right now, you can go in the share drive and go to the resources tab to find the LOI.
Yeah, so it's basic. And again, to highlight for this whole beginner series, realize this LOI is non-binding. It'll say that. We'll talk about all the things, you know, inspection period. What does that mean? What does the seller have to give to us? And it feels like a contract, but it is not. Basically, it says this is not intended to be a binding agreement. It makes that very clear. We will sign, both parties will sign. It's just saying, hey, we have a gentleman's agreement that we're going to go under contract and here are the terms, but the contract itself is going to be spelled with specific terms out. So this is what an LOI looks like, guys. Very simple. This is a 4-page version. Sometimes they're 1-pagers, sometimes they're 2 pages. It's rarely going to be more than 5 pages for an LOI. This is not meant to be super in depth. This is hitting the high level details to make sure we're all on the same page there.
The funny thing was that Jeremy actually sent me his template of an LOI to draft and send to him.
That's great, man.
So he was very familiar with it.
So from there, as you're considering getting under contract, this is also when you're gonna need to figure out, get your ducks in the row for how is the risk capital gonna come into play here. This is when money starts to be a thing, right? And so when it comes to risk capital, realize you're gonna need money for inspections. You're gonna need money for your earnest money deposit. You need money for, insurance fees sometimes up front, locking in various rates. Like there's a bunch of different fees out there that you need to consider. And Reggie, specifically, I know we had one thing we want to talk through with EMD for this one. What was it again?
With EMD, well,
I want to say it was leveraging so sometimes when EMD is going to go hard, let me see if we can figure out our specific example and pull it back up.
Oh, the early access clause.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when things were a little hotter, a lot of sellers were demanding that your earnest money go hard day one. So if you had to back out of the contract for any reason, they kept your money. They can't really do that right now, but one kind of way around that is there's usually something in the PSA that says, hey, earnest money to be deposited within 5 days of executing this contract, or 10 days even. And so sometimes what we would do is try to get an early access clause saying, hey, you'll give us access to the property as soon as the PSA is signed. And so we've got 5, maybe 10 days to go and do some inspections. If we find something we don't like, we get the hell out of Dodge. We haven't spent any money, and perhaps just risk having our reputation be slightly tarnished because we pulled the trigger too soon.
Exactly. So what he's saying is, there is this time period between the LOI and the official contract being made that you can get this early access thing. Normal contracts, we had a 45-day due diligence in this one as an example. But normal contracts, 30, 45, 60, sometimes a year, depending if you're doing a full up development, sometimes an entire year of due diligence. But if the seller's trying to put your feet to the fire and you're trying to win this deal and you want to be creative to win the deal, one way to be creative is by leveraging this concept of the all access period or the early access period there. So yeah, there's that. Our earnest money deposit piece. Inspection piece. Inspection fees are going to vary as far as their amount. We've spent as much as $20,000 for inspections and as little as $1,000. I mean, to give you a rough range, but it's going to be as intense as you want. We've found that we really like using some professional inspection companies out there that specialize in leveraging for multifamily. You don't have to though. I mean, a normal home inspector could go and inspect properties as well, as long as they're ideally licensed from the commercial space, so they understand a commercial building different from a residential building. But beyond that, inspections aren't crazy. Don't feel like you need to, it's a complicated process, because it's not. All right, negotiating contract terms. So from here, we send the LOI and we're now going back and forth with the seller. We'll start to draft the contract. And the contract itself is going to be drafted by either party up front, and that's going to be negotiated via the LOI. Ideally, you want to be in charge of this, so you're starting with your terms, but it doesn't always have to be the case because both attorneys will agree. But someone will draft the contract, and that contract will then be sent to the other party to what we call redline. That party will then redline that contract saying, hey, I don't like this. I want to change this to this. You'll kind of track the changes in that document to see what's going on. And that's how you negotiate back and forth. And eventually you get to an agreed upon contract that both attorneys on both sides agree to, we're all happy with, we sign. And that's how we're officially then create what we call the purchase and sale agreement, or the PSA. We do have the PSA in here somewhere. Show you what that one looks like on ours.
Yeah, there's always a lot of timelines in those. So what I like to do, just for my own peace of mind, is just kind of make a list out. Like, hey, these are when the contract milestones are, because sometimes time can slip by and maybe you missed one, and maybe it has a material impact, but something to be aware of.
Yeah, exactly. So we take that LOI, which was a 4-pager, and we then create a 26-page document with those details, which is filled with the legalese of buying a large commercial property. So you can see this is Citronelle Square. You can see this changed Ross Residential, right? It was Citronelle Square LLC and Ross Residential LLC, because this is when you're gonna also, you saw the original LOI was Ferrari Capital. Nobody really cares in the commercial space as far as LLCs. People realize oftentimes you're gonna be creating entities. So don't stress about who's signing the LOI. Just concentrate on getting a good deal under contract, and we'll figure out the parties in the backside. So a lot of people's, it's spending time on details that don't matter up front, right? Just get the big picture details sorted. All right, and this is it. I mean, it's a standard purchase and sale agreement. It's going to describe everything. It's going to be the LOI, but in legalese terms that you go back and forth and draft. All right, show you guys what that one looks like. All right, then from there, a part of the contract terms, you could deal with counteroffers. So once you get under contract, that's when you really start to inject your inspections, right? Inspections are going to occur after you're officially under contract, typically, sometimes beforehand with an early access period. And so there are times where you're under contract and you go to the inspection and you find, crap, dude, we just found a dead body in unit 4 and they stink, and that entire unit needs to be cleansed thoroughly. It's going to be another $10,000 to do whatever, biohazard cleaning needs to be done. Like, okay, well, like that, I need to renegotiate, or hey, Mr. Seller, I need you to make sure this is done and that unit is leased before before we close. And so as your guys are going through your due diligence phase, once you're under contract, which we're kind of segueing into the next section here of due diligence, this is when counter offers and that kind of back and forth of being under contract, you can retrade or renegotiate terms as needed in that process. We try to avoid it. It's kind of bad form, to be honest with you. But surprises happen, right? If it's a surprise that's big enough, and you're justified in asking for the change, go and ask for it. It's totally fine. Like, people understand in this business. It's just, don't make a habit of it, or don't request. Like, let's say you're going through the units and you found like, oh, one unit, you said they were all turned and all had brand new floor, but this one unit still had carpet in it. Like, all right, dude, suck it up. Don't be a little wimp over like one little change, because it's bad form for the business overall. Okay.
Hey, Matt,
Go ahead, Reggie.
real quick, I just wanted to share, and I think me and Josh might have told you about this before, but we were actually going back and forth on a contract with a seller, and they wanted a clause. This was back in, I guess, 2019. They wanted to put a clause in the contract that said the contract was null and void if we didn't close before December 31st, or if a certain president got elected.
Yeah.
Like, I swear, like you can put anything in the contract, but anyway.
That's it, man. That's it. You gotta love it.
And then that person ended up getting elected. So
Yeah, we backed out of that deal anyway, though.
Let me pull this one up. Yeah, I don't want to deal with people like that. It's annoying. All right. So next, we're now under contract. So now we're getting a little bit more in depth with the actual due diligence phase, which I know we've talked on the advanced section on this one, but as you're going through these timelines now, we're officially under contract. We're like, all right, it's getting real, guys. Like, we might actually buy an apartment complex. Like, what do we do now? Let's figure this out. And so inspections, right? So there's physical inspections, there's digital inspections, and there's timelines to consider with the inspections. We kind of talked within the LOI, which will then be pulled into the PSA, which are going to really dictate what those timelines look like. We talked early access, where sometimes you can push up those timelines and make it happen early or before we're officially under contract. But that's how it's all going to run when it comes to the inspection period. You could have different timelines per each inspection, right? You could have a timeline in the contract for your phase 1 inspection. You could have a separate timeline for your physical actual unit inspection. But most people, they're going to have just a general due diligence period that's saying, man, I'm going to do everything I can in this period and look under everything. And then after that, I'm going to say, hey, I have my money hard. My earnest money will be hard, or a portion of my earnest money will be hard after that point, because I am committed to closing this deal.
Well, guys, real quick, please make sure you use an attorney. Don't try to make these changes yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Your attorney should have I mean, like any good attorney who's has fiduciary duties, protecting you legally. They are there to help you out. I know they charge money, but try not to let money be a deterrent in getting good legal advice or protecting you. And really, it's not even about protecting you, to be honest with you. If you're seriously considering getting your other people's money involved, it is your fiduciary responsibility to make sure that you are protecting your clients legally as well. So the last thing I would want you to do, get some great deal under contract, but there's some crazy clause in the contract that you end up screwing all of your investors because you didn't use an attorney to review it. That's the last thing you want to have happen. So if it's your own money, dude, you do what you want with your own money. If you want to take the risk, that's totally on you. I wouldn't recommend it though.
I think that was another thing you guys were wanting to mention about the earnest money, right? Earnest money is not always put towards the purchase.
That's what it was. That's exactly what it was. So when it comes to earnest money, and one thing that an attorney will save you on, sometimes the way that earnest money is written in an LOI and the contract, it doesn't go towards the down payment or the closing costs at the closing table. Sometimes it's a straight up fee. They'll call it an earnest money fee. And so that money will go to the seller, and it has nothing to do with the down payment. It has nothing to do with it. It's just so completely separate and disconnected from the closing itself. And that'll screw you, right? Especially if a $20,000 earnest money, a $30,000, $100,000 earnest money deposit, that doesn't count towards a down payment or your fees at the end of the day. That's not fun. That's a bullet you need to bite. And luckily we've not experienced that, but I know investors who have dealt with that firsthand, and it's just a silly mistake to have to deal with. Okay, next thing, inspections. So like I said, we have physical inspections we talked about. That's going to be mainly like walking the units and dealing with that. And then you have the digital inspections, which digital meaning could be physical papers, or it could be digital copies of those papers. So it's going to be your lease audits. It's going to be your rent roll. You're going to be diving more into the weeds with the actual financials, any sort of CapEx stuff that we talked about, all those seller documents we talked about previously. That's when you're going to really get in the weeds and verify all these things. So you say, okay, Mrs. Smith's supposed to be in unit 3. When we walk unit 3, I want to talk to somebody whose name is Mrs. Smith. And we kind of go through that whole process of verifying the digital and the physical within the timelines that we're given. Now, there are going to be certain insurance considerations. So for this deal specifically, as we were under due diligence, I'll let Josh and Reggie kind of give the big picture of where we stood. The property we were buying in this example, Citronelle, was in the process of dealing with insurance claims that had not been closed out. So Josh, Reggie, whoever wants to take that to kind of paint that picture a little bit more for everyone.
Yeah, Reggie, you handled a lot of that with our RCA and all that.
Yeah, I tried to block it out. I have a little PTSD, if I'm being honest. So yeah, well, it was funny and maybe a sign of things to come. I think, didn't we actually get this under LOI like the day Hurricane Sally landed?
It looked like the LOI looked like September 14th was the day that the contract was signed. And I think it was end of September and end of October was when those two hurricanes hit.
Yeah, I remember it was somewhat close together, but so Hurricane Sally caused some damage at the property that we had under LOI, perhaps even under contract at this time. And so that kind of threw a monkey wrench into our, we were just kind of uncertain. This is our first deal, and now it was kind of in limbo, or we just didn't know what was going to happen. And so as the sellers worked through the insurance process, they said, look, this is no big deal. The damages that happened, we can, we're still willing to go through with the transaction and make it equitable for both parties, blah, blah, blah. Well, so fast forward, they hired a third party insurance. I'm not even sure what you call them, but they
like right of attorney or something.
I think insurance leech. I think it's leech is the right word.
leech, yeah, some kind of parasitic organism. But yeah, so they basically like act on your behalf to extract the most money out of the insurance claim as you can. It's a little bureaucratic and not very efficient. I've never had a positive experience with it anyway. I don't want to completely dog it from this one instance, but so basically they hired this company to, work on their behalf. And then we were going to close and then just kind of pick up, where the sellers left off. So we were going to have to oversee the construction. We were going to have to hire the roofing contractors. We were going to have to work with the bank. We had to put some money, they had to hold some funds back in escrow that they would release to us to pay specifically for some of the work that was being done. And so this added like this additional layer of complexity on top of something that we were doing for the first time. So it was a lot, but we took the risk, and it still ended up working out in our favor. It was not easy, but we learned a lot. And that's what you'll find is when you experience a huge problem, get ready to learn.
Yeah, I will say, I highlight the insurance consideration just because that's one unique aspect that every deal is going to have some unique aspect. We've yet to have like a vanilla deal, right? Everything went great. We're under contract, LOI, we close. Like there's always some aspect of a deal that is, we'll say, non-standard, right? It should be standard that there's a non-standard aspect of the deal, really. So that's just one, that's the variable at this play for this example that I wanted to highlight. Now, I will say from there, as you're doing your due diligence, this is when you start to prepare your CapEx budget, right? You're saying, okay, how much is all this going to cost? Because upfront, when you're doing your analysis, you're saying, okay, for this example, there was some roof damage. We know we're going to get a chunk of change from the sellers for the insurance claim, but it's not going to be enough to cover all the damage. So how much capital do we need to bring to the table to finish out this whole CapEx project? And this is what I want to show you just to highlight the fact that you really need to shop around appropriately when it comes to due diligence and these larger projects. So what this is RCA. This is that company, Roofing and Reconstruction Contractors of America. They said, hey man, we're going to help you guys out. And we're gonna run this project for you, and we're gonna re-roof this project. We're gonna give you a re-roof for all the buildings. How many buildings were there? Seven or eight buildings?
It was a everything. We're like, we're just gonna do everything.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, this quote here was for re-roof, and this roof itself was $727,000. You guys can see that $727,000 to get new roofs. And some hips and some various aspects of the roof, but effectively 7 new roofs or 8 new roofs, however many buildings there were. Which, if you've ever replaced a roof, that's a very high price. But again, we're in a tertiary market. We're like, how much is this? Like, was this realistic? But this all goes to show you, you really need to shop around, because we ended up replacing the roof for a whopping cost of, what do you guys think before I show you the actual budget, give me a number, someone guess out there, start throwing it in the chat. How much do you think we ended up replacing the roof for? The original quote was $727,000. Let's throw it in the chat. What do you think we actually got the roof replaced for? 285,
Pretty good.
175, 100K, 170, 395, 200, 150. Okay,
This is the price of right.
Pretty good,
final
yes.
number on all the roofs ended up being, Oliver, you are the closest, brother. $151,000. Save
So
that.
actually, this is one of the more expensive quotes that we didn't go with. I shared one more file with you,
Yeah.
which was the actual, but it ended up being about 20,000 a roof. Now they did vinyl siding and stuff for us too, but yeah, it ended up being closer to like 100.
Yeah.
How many squares was it?
That's-
Ooh,
Shoot.
uh,
that
don't
penguin
remember.
left my iceberg, my man. My iceberg only holds so many penguins. They got to get kicked off every now and again. I mean, I guess we could look in the quotes. It's probably in the quote there. But yeah,
We've gone over how to price that based on how many
how many squares? Yeah. I mean, you can definitely get, I mean, for any of these CapEx projects, the only thing I'm trying to highlight here, not specifically, hey, this is how much a roof should cost. What I'm trying to highlight is, do your due diligence appropriately. And if someone says, hey, the sky is green, doesn't mean you need to believe that the sky is green, right? Go out and ask somebody else. And if you get 3 other people say the sky is blue, I'd probably go talk to those people, right? So if someone says it costs $700,000 to replace the roof, don't accept that as gospel. Go out there and try to get a couple bids to see what a realistic quote's going to be. And you've heard it before. Don't always go with the lowest bidder, right? That's not always the right process goes. It's a balance of price, reviews, availability. You're going to do that whole part of why you're trying to create your whole CapEx budget right now. And it's not just the CapEx budget; it's really the whole project management that you're planning for going forward after closing. All right, lease audit process. We kind of talked to this already. I was going to bring up a lease, but just for time's sake, so I'm already over my 10 minutes for this slide. Just realize a lease is a lease is a lease, but there are things you want to make sure the lease that is signed matches what the rent roll is saying as far as the deposit amount, the rent that they're paying, if there's any addendums there. Do they have a pet inside there? Are there supposed to be pet fees? Is that associated with the rent roll? What are the late fees that they're paying versus what does it say on the lease for the late fees that they're paying? Are there any other weird considerations? Most leases are going to revert to a month after the lease expires, but sometimes there's weird verbiage in there that just extends the lease further. So there's a bunch of weird things you want to watch out for. Most leases should be identical in the property, so you should review one very intensely, and then you should kind of just peruse the other ones to make sure the data is correct. But sometimes you'll get 6 to 7 different leases in each one, and it's just going to build that headache a little bit more to consider. So that's the whole lease audit process. It's not fun. It's more of a bean counting and quality control check, but it's a very important aspect to understand.
That third party company that we usually hire also can do that for you.
Yeah. You still, even if you have a third party company doing it for you, you want to at least review one. Again, you still want to be smart on the leases going in. That is obviously a big factor that's affecting your ability to change that apartment complex. All right, reviewing existing contract. We talked to this again previously before at a more in-depth level, but what is the current property manager contract on file right now? Like, what is the requirement upon sale with those guys? Is there anything weird or quirky there? Maintenance agreements. Is there a landscaper that signed a 3-year contract that goes up 3% every year you need to be aware of? Laundry facilities, CSC is CSC as a laundry facility company out to screw you guys again because they have a contract where they locked them in for a 10-year term or something crazy. So review the contracts, make sure you understand what you're getting into. And that's all due diligence is. It's just understanding the territory that you're going into, right? Like before I go into battle, I want to understand my enemy as much as possible. So I feel confident in stepping onto that battlefield, right? And so this is really what this is. It's intelligence before the battle, right? Because the battle doesn't really start until closing. That's when you take over and the real work begins. So from there, we've done our due diligence, but one part of due diligence that deserves its own separate little section is going to be the lending requirements itself. So while we're under contract right now, the lender, as the person in charge, the person who's going to say, yes, you can buy this property or not, we need to say, hey, mom, mom, what do I need to do before I can go out to play? Right? Like what are my chores for today that I need to know before I can go out and do stuff? And so that's what this process is. So we talked about preparing your personal financial statement. And it's just a matter of keeping those updated. And so you're ready to go. And if you need to just create one from scratch, create one from scratch. But as your wealth and your accumulation of assets grows, highly recommend just trying to keep that updated on a semi-regular basis. They're also going to want to see your schedule of real estate owned, which we've showed you guys as well before. I'll show you the biographies here. So this is part of our investor pitch deck. But for this one,
The ancient original pitch deck.
so this is I loved how Josh used his wedding picture for like 3 years. It was great. I was like super professional. He looks awesome, but the classic wedding tux was great. It doesn't need to be great, right? I mean, you tell them what it is. You try to color yourself in the best light possible, and you kind of just show people who you are. The last thing you want to do is lie on the biography, but you don't want to make yourself look bad either. So highlight whatever aspects of your life you can in a positive sense. Get the best professional looking picture you can, and you throw it on there, and that's what one of the terms that the lender's going to want to see, guys.
Yeah, look how different Reggie looks in that photo too.
Well, that's when Reggie didn't shave his head. Yeah, Reggie's a whole.
Dude,
He's a badass now.
I have aged so much since we started this multifamily thing.
All the gray hair, it's hitting you.
Hey, everyone's like, oh crap, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. This is terrible. Maybe other people are like, man, Reggie looks awesome. I want a shaved head and a beard like that. That's wisdom right there on that beard. Who knows? So yeah, crafting the biography. So you want to craft an effective biography. Make yourself look good from that as much as you can. If let's say there's 3 of you that are working together to tackle a deal, and you're going to partner with 3 Beach Capital, like me, Josh, and Reggie. As much as possible, you don't want to have 6 different biographies highlighting every individual investor. If you can kind of group up into groups, it makes it a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for?
Succinct.
Yes, succinct, consolidated, more like you're actually a unit. So it'll make the bank, it looks better in the bank's eyes if you're like, all right, sweet, here we are. Paul does this, and Matt does this, and Dylan does this, but we're all part of ABC Capital, and this is how we're taking it down. Rather than being like, we have Paul Capital LLC, we have you kind of break it down in that sense. Try to look as much of a consolidated unit as you can to the lender. I think it just in general just looks strong. All right. Biographies. Next thing, understanding appraisals. So I will show you the appraisal here. While I'm bringing that up, Reggie, you want to talk any specific points for the appraisals?
On appraisals, if you don't like the one that you get the first time, request a second one. We have successfully, I think only one time did we get a second appraisal, but we have gotten the appraiser to adjust the first appraisal. Now, that's usually difficult to do because they don't want to set precedents. They're under a lot of scrutiny, especially after the whole 2008 debacle, but it can be done. So if you don't like the number, challenge their assumptions, come to them with data, justify your position, and maybe they'll change it.
Didn't we get stuck with the blacklisted guy too?
Yeah, like 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
You'll find there's not a ton of appraisers in the commercial market. I mean, it's a small group of guys who appraise in the market, and so there are some who are known to be the guys who are the nut crushers, right? They have the highest cap rates, and they'll kind of crush you on expenses, and they'll do everything they can to justify low values. And then there's other people who are the Santa Clauses out there as well. So like you get the hit the run of the mix. As far as cost of an appraisal, $3,000 to $5,000 range ish, is going to be the range. This one was $3,200 for us for the appraisal. That's going to determine, the size of the unit, if it's spread out over a couple of properties or not, like how the package looks like, everything. They're going to give you their own assessment of value. But this is a 98-page document assessing the value. So $1,737,000 is what this one appraised to be. And what we were under contract originally for.
But we bought it at 185.
185, exactly.
So this was the first appraisal that we then combated, and didn't we get him to come up to 185?
We did.
Yep. So just to give you an example, don't be surprised if it falls short. You're going to see all sorts of stuff in an appraisal. Again, I'm not going to go through all 98 pages. but there's going to be market data, there's going to be comp data. Some data is actually pretty good if you go through it. A lot of the data is really, really dry, but it's worth it to peruse and kind of finger drag the appraisal and then highlight the things that you think are important. And then, yeah, it's obviously a very important document when it comes to lender requirements to the appraisal. All right. Phase one. In this case, we already had a phase one done. If there's a recent phase one, you can borrow that from the seller, is one thing you can do. And so in this one, we already had one done. What a phase one is, again, that's just it is an environmental site assessment. It's basically saying, hey, was this a prior nuclear waste site? Was there a gas station here previously where it's an issue? I recently sold as an agent. I sold, it was a 14 unit in Panama City Beach, and that's what it was. It was a prior gas station that was there 50 years ago, and so they just needed to make sure that was mitigated appropriately, and in that sense, there wasn't any contaminations that they had to deal with. If there are further studies that need to be done, that's when you get what they call a phase two study, which is going to be a much more detailed study and much more expensive kind of process to jump into. The lender is also going to jump into the insurance piece, and you're going to have certain insurance requirements that the lender is going to dictate as far as the amounts that are required, or specific types of insurance they're going to try to impose on you. So you're going to need to coordinate between your insurance broker and your lender when it comes to this to figure out what the specific requirements are that they're clarifying or they're requiring, I should say. Then the last piece that we'll speak to here is the key principle, the KP. Realize in big picture, you need to have someone who's a part of the general partner, or the general partnership in general needs to have liquidity of 10% of the loan balance at closing, post-closing. So you can't give up that 10% at closing and then you're broke. They want to see it, after your closing, you still have that 10% of liquidity, and you want to have a net worth of equal to or greater than the loan balance. So if you don't have a partner that has those qualifications, this is where it's really good to be a wealthy person that just signs on loans all day long. He doesn't really do anything else. He's just a KP. It goes on, he gets equity just because he's rich, right? Those are the type of people that it's a good place to be. So that's the basics of a key principal qualifications. Now, obviously, every lender could change that. It's this lender specific. This is not not written in stone, but those are the kind of general terms you're going to see required for key principal out there. All right, next step and last one here, that we're going to talk today, and we'll open up the questions. Deal structures. All right, so now we've gotten it under contract, we've done our due diligence, and now we're like, all right, man, like I understand the battleground, right? I understand where the enemy stands. There's a minefield over here. There's the enemies over here. There's a shit over here we got to deal with. Now, what is my plan of attack? How am I attacking this as a partnership? This is more the offensive plan. How am I going to structure this? And so this is all going to start with your pro forma. So in your analyzer, when you did your analyzer, like I said, there's some steps in there of analyzing the current deal, but that's when you're also going to grow your pro forma, and that's kind of your future plan of attack. That's what that is. This one, again, we're talking about understanding the insurance claims process. Again, for this specific deal with Citronelle, part of our deal structure had to do with like, how are we tackling this whole insurance piece, and who amongst us as the GPs will kind of head that piece. And you play the game of straws. Who draws the short straw in that case? And sorry, Reggie drew the short straw on that one.
It was me.
Yeah. So that's the first two kind of things to consider. And then from there, you're going to start looking for partners, right? And so the partner search piece is interesting. Like we've engaged in partnerships that I will never do again. Like there's one deal. I don't know. I don't want to bash anyone openly on a recorded line here, but there are some partners that I don't ever want to do a deal with again. Or there are certain partnership structures that I personally don't want to jump into again. For instance, as a minority GP, we have some deals where we consider minority GPs where I don't have enough equity as a general partner to really influence the deal at a grand scale. Like I can throw in my input, but I can't be like, hey, we are doing this. I don't have enough votes to make that happen. And I don't like being in that position with these certain partners. There's other partners where we're minority GPs, and I'm completely happy with it because I love them as partners and they're fantastic. We have the same work ethic, but other partners, they don't. And so when you're looking for partners, realize it's not just the way when people ask me, hey, how do I find a good deal to be an LP in? You're investing in the deal, but you're really investing in the investor. You're investing in the person running that deal. So when you're looking for partners out there, just really consider not just their experience, but consider who they are as an individual and if they're going to back their word. Any other things you guys want to say, Josh or Reggie, for the partner search?
I mean, yeah, I guess I just talk about how we all kind of became
Yeah.
partners in its most basic form. I was just active on Bigger Pockets. And I can't remember if it was me that reached out to Reggie or if Reggie reached out to me, but one of us saw the other person actively posting and commenting in forums and saw that the other person was local to Mobile, reached out, scheduled a time to go grab some coffee at a shop. Conversation went, I thought, pretty good, but honestly, I left the conversation not thinking too much of it. Just thought Reggie was another cool dude to add to the cool dude portfolio. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, 2-3 months later, maybe, that I actually had a deal that looked like it made financial sense. At which point I was immediately adding value by bringing the deal to the table, that it made sense for me to reach out and be like, hey man, you want to do this deal with me? I just remember Reggie didn't even hesitate. He was like, sure, let's look at it. And of course we didn't end up buying it, but that was the simple beginning of our partnership. And then we were looking at deals together for what, 9 months, 10 months before we finally got this one under contract. And then Matt came in and saved the day at the end, which again met Matt through Jeremy, who was my mentor during that 2-year stint of me really trying to get focused on getting into commercial.
Yeah. So, I mean, just keep your eye open for good partners out there, because they're out there in various capacities. And I know a lot of you guys have asked us with the 3 Beach piece if we'd be willing to partner with you guys, and 100% we're willing to partner with you guys on deals that fit our criteria. And by no means are we ever going to try to insert ourselves into your deals unnecessarily. So don't ever feel like we are going to ever try to do that to you guys. And if you ever feel like we are trying to insert ourselves into your deals, please call us out, okay? Because I don't want to ever be in that position that you guys feel in a way that you can't present deals to the group or to us because you feel like we're trying to, insert ourselves there, because that's definitely not the means we're trying to go for. All right, so that's the partnership search. Next thing is going to be defining exit strategy. So part of this deal structure, part of this plan of attack, when I go to drop a bomb in the middle of freaking, Russia, with these battle plans I would do back in the day, I don't say half, but a good portion of my brief wasn't just going and dropping the bomb on the target. A good portion of the brief was, man, once I drop that bomb and the bee's nest is now, the bees are swarming, how the hell are we getting back home? And so you got to understand, what is your exit strategy out of these deals? Because that's going to really determine a lot of things here. Now, there are alternate paths to explore when you're looking at exit strategies, right? Don't get so hyper focused on the traditional long-term rental play that you don't want to consider, medium-term rental, short-term rental, storage, that you might be able to leverage within these complexes. I will say, anytime you're exploring alternate paths as far as opportunities for the deal, I almost never consider them part of my main pro forma. They're more icing on the cake. Like, hey, if this works, that's great. We're going to make an extra $100,000, but I'm not going to run my numbers assuming that's the case. That's just the way I personally run it. Like I was just talking to an investor the other day. He's under contract for 80 acres in outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And he's planning on creating a glamping site. It's like he's going to, I think it was like 30 different glamping sites on this 80 acres. It overlooks this beautiful, it's called Chimney Rock or Chimney Point out there. And it's supposed to be really, really picturesque out there. He's got like views of these waterfalls and stuff. It's like really gorgeous. And he's like, yeah, so I'm running my numbers, and I'm going to do a wedding venue as well. And I'm also going to rent, he has a sheer cliff on the side that he's going to give access to the local rock climbing association. He's going to make fees on having them climb his rock walls. But I was like, dude, that's great. I love the business plan, how you're looking at these alternate plans. However, I wouldn't bank on the fact that somebody's going to rent your cliff. I wouldn't bank on the fact that these weddings are going to happen. If they do, that's great. That's going to be another, icing on the cake, but run your numbers as if it's purely a glamping site, because that's what your baseline business is going to be. And that's what he was doing. And so kind of talking through those paths and just understanding that, yeah, it's great to look at other ways to make money, but make that, I don't know, don't blow smoke up your own asses and thinking that all these things are gonna work to the extremes. All right. Then from there, we've talked in depth about how to structure the general partnership. We've talked about there's certain, you can look at it. I recommend looking at it objectively, like who's bringing us the deal, who's putting risk capital, who's the KP, who's the asset manager, and kind of breaking it up there. And that's how you're going to say, okay, here's our partnership, guys. We found everyone. Here's how we're breaking it up. All right. you know, you guys own this much, you break it down to say, sorry, let's see here. Let's go, we go with like, we break it down, we'll say, all right, Eli, dude, you brought the deal to the table, you got 15%, you know, Paul, let's see, man, you're going to throw in 100 grand for risk capital, man, you got this much percent, you know, hey, Chris, you're bringing this to us, so I appreciate it. So Chris, I'm going to need you to, you get, you know, 20% of the deal. And then, you know, Oliver, he's going to bite the bullet. He's going to be the asset manager. So Oliver, man, you get 30%, bro, of the GP. So good on you. And we really need you to crush it because, you know, that's a massive part of this deal. And so you sit down and now you understand everyone's ownership, everyone's roles and responsibilities. And then that makes it very clear for kind of what's going on from there. All right. Let's see, structuring general partnership. And then from there, we've developed the structure and now we're getting ready to kind of do the raise. And from here, it's going to be, all right, what are our investment minimums? How do we want to run this as a general partnership? How many investors do we want in this deal? Do we want to have 35 investors? Do we want to have 35 LPs? Do we think we have access to people? We can do this with 5 limited partners. Do we want this to be a 506B, 506C syndication? And all these things are going to kind of determine those minimums based on the amount of raise. And these are all kind of soft understandings that you'll do amongst yourselves as general partners. And it'll be an open discussion, be like, all right, you know, hey, you know, Eli, you think you have these investors that you're pretty confident can bring 2 million to the table. Great. You know, Josh has someone else who can bring 3 million to the table. Great. There's 5 million amongst everyone, but you'll quickly realize in this game, as you guys start to actually raise money, somebody saying they want to invest with you and somebody actually sending you $1 million. These are two very different things. These are worlds apart. People will say one thing and act another way. And so I'm really happy you guys do these challenges, like what Josh saying, hey man, I raised $5 million. I raised 10 million. I raised $50 million raised, right? We use the term loosely here because it's really helping you go through the process of trying to get people involved and realizing you're out there. But when you actually go to get the money and determine these minimums, your confidence will play a role with this discussion for what we think the minimum should be. So keep it with that. All right. That was the big picture, broad overview, guys, of how you find a deal to all the way through deal structure. I will open it up to questions now. With a little bit. Oh, was that almost exactly an hour? I don't know. I think we almost nailed it though. Let's see what we got now as far as questions. I've not been looking at the chat at all. Oh, you guys were answering them as we went. That's great.
We answered some, we didn't answer all of them.
All right, I'll just read the first one out loud. Having a list of the usual lender questions to ask would be super handy. Like Reggie just mentioned, I have 12 deals I need to look at, but not 100% of the normal questions I should ask. I think I wrote down 2 of those just now. Okay, so Reggie, do you want to go a little more in detail on some of the questions in that regard?
Yeah, which, let me see. See, Heart Capital says having a list of the usual lender questions to ask would be super handy. You know, I think about it from the term sheet perspective. Like if you know what terms, you know, you're trying to underwrite to, or that you're gonna have to tweak, that's like big picture. And the bank will always share like, you know, soft details with us. Like for instance, our primary lender, I guess you could say, they told us like, hey, you guys are our ideal customers. We're seeking people out just like you guys. We love multifamily. You know, we're bullish on it. They want to lend to that. And it's like, you know, it's the holy grail. Like, you know, if you can link up with a bank whose business goals align with your goals, then it works. So as far as like developing some questions, I'd have to sit down and think about that. I think we could all probably contribute to that.
If Reggie did riff off more questions, then you guys will get the transcript of this as well afterwards. So you can just copy and paste from the transcript. It'd be a lot of Southern draw and y'alls, but that's okay. Beyond that, you know, he's an intelligent guy.
Yeah, you have Google Translate, so.
Paul asked for attorney fees, inspection fees, and other typical fees before closing. Around how much would you recommend to have on the ready? I don't know. It's definitely different for every single deal. What would you guys say? We've spent anywhere between 30 to.
You can break it down by deal. I mean, so the biggest variable is probably going to be earnest money deposit, which is going to be based on the size of the deal, right? So you're typically looking at 1% for the earnest money deposit. So if we're looking at we'll say a $10 million deal as a round number. So 1% of that is what? $100,000.
100K. Yeah.
100K. So you're looking at 100K for an earnest money deposit up front. Attorney fees, man, they'll vary. You're looking at the low end, probably $5,000 up to $20,000 range, depending on which attorney you're using, how much you're actually involved with them. We've been as cheap as what, $2,000, $2,500 sometimes up front, but the fees always add up to, I feel like $5,000 is like the starting minimum with and when we're dealing with an actual deal from start to finish there. And then inspection fees, like I said, inspection fees will vary. I would say on a 50 to 150 unit range, you're probably looking on the low end $10,000 up to 25,000. Give you a range there for kind of inspections out there. Other typical fees before closing. Sometimes lenders will charge you fees to lock in rates or to have what are the other fees they call it? I feel like there's another fee I keep forgetting that the lender will charge us with.
There's like origination fee. Sometimes they'll make you pay a doc fee, recording fees, their attorney's fees. It just depends. But and, you know, sometimes what they'll do, a lot of times they hire the appraiser, and so they'll just they'll pay the appraiser and then just stick it on the closing statement. So if you can do as much of that as possible, that's less money out of y'all's pockets.
Yeah.
So having all that cash at the ready is great. Makes it easy on you to just simply transact and go through the process. But it's kind of like a secondary to Michael's question about how do you find earnest money if you don't have any. Same thing for all the fees, just all the upfront costs. If you're really truly trying to close a deal, but you're like, look, I got $10 in the bank account and this just ain't feasible for me. Well, there's other business partners. You can find someone else who has a lot more liquidity than you that has similar goals, similar vision, complementary skill set. They just have more money and you don't. So you fill the void of spending a bunch of time or adding other areas of value add that isn't necessarily financial. LPs can even put down EMD. It's not extremely likely. Usually you'll end up giving them a slice of the GP, at least a little slice, if they're putting their money up front immediately as a primary passive investor. And they'll get an extra piece of the GP for having that additional risk capital on the front end. And then there are some lenders that actually have transactional funding options, different loan products where you can get EMD and due diligence, and they'll charge you points or a fee for that.
Yep. The other thing you could do, you can cross collateralize as well. So if you want to go, like I'm part of Pace Morby's group, the Gator method, and they specialize in transactional lending. And so something like that in that group, if you were to say, hey, I need $100,000 for the next 2 months, someone would jump on that if the price is right for what you're willing to pay for that $100,000, as well as you collateralize it. So let's say you guys have another asset over here, you're willing to put it on your primary house or another investment property that you have paid off with some equity. You can put that kind of cross collateral. Okay, sweet. I'll give you guys that money, but I'm going to put a lien on something else you own just in case you screw me. I can then take an asset for something else. And so as long as there's ways to be creative when it comes to borrowing money, if you guys don't want to give up the equity in the deal. I'm typically one just to partner up and give up equity, but that's not always the right answer. I mean, it's smart to take as much equity as you can.
Ethan said, do you make CapEx assumptions before the inspection as well? How would you actually estimate that?
Yeah, I responded to Ethan, but I accidentally did it directly, but I'll share the answer with everybody. What I said to Ethan is I usually just start with a broad rule of thumb. So I'll just say, okay, 10% of the purchase price, I'll probably need to set aside that amount for some amount of CapEx. And then after I go through the inspection process, you know, as we learn more information, I might adjust that up or down. And it can be pretty significant. It can be up to 30% or more, depending on, you know, if you were going for a repositioning play, for instance, or maybe it's a new build, maybe it's a new construction. It was built a year ago. Maybe you don't need any CapEx. Now you always want to budget some, but I would say 10% is a good starting place. For newer properties, probably need less. Older properties might need more. Depending on your business plan, you might need more. But that's my rule of thumb.
One of the things we'll do as far as reserves, so the reserves and CapEx are kind of often like meshed into the same bucket. I'm a big fan of having actual reserve bucket separate from the CapEx though. And for reserves, I like to have 6 months of effectively operating expenses plus an insurance deductible. 6 months of paying the mortgage plus an insurance deductible. So we'll look at what is our debt servicing for 6 months. we'll multiply, look at that number and we'll add, 1 or 2%, whatever our insurance deductible happens to be. And that'll be my minimum that I like to have sitting on the side as a buffer. Worst case scenario, this thing goes to hell in a handbasket. I know we at least have a 6-month buffer to like figure out what the hell's going on. And so that also allows us to easily determine disbursements as well. So if let's say your min reserve is 100 grand, and every quarter you can do simple man's math at that point. If that's truly a reserve and CapEx projects have been handled at that point, you can say, all right, sweet. At the end of the quarter, we have $125,000. Let's go and disperse 25 grand. It can be simple man's math if you have that kind of minimum threshold that you want to keep for some sort of a sustainable model there.
Chris,
Yeah, great point.
I was looking at your question, Chris. Could you expound a little bit more on what the question is?
Yeah, I mean, just how do you need to really put a ton of focus on trying to find and source off-market deals, or is there enough? I guess I'm struggling right now in the central Indiana area, and I'm sure it's a timing issue as well, but there's everything I look at, it doesn't even pencil out to go through and do additional analysis on. So is it, I'm just not looking for the right
what
deals,
I'll say is try not to get too scared on list price either. All right. So if you take the time to pencil a deal, it doesn't hurt to at least throw out the verbal, right? I mean, if you found a number that works, you never get. I tell you what, I never offered a price to a seller where they countered me lower than the price that I was offering. You know what I mean? Like they're never going to give you a deal, right? So the only way to get a deal is to ask for it. So don't be afraid to go through the motions, especially like we talked about last week in the underwriting when we were trying to quick underwriting. If you're justified in your offer, you should feel no qualms in saying, hey, dude, like, I know you're asking 10 million, but 6 million is the number that makes sense for me. I wish I could go more, but would you guys be willing to entertain 6 million? Is that even worth writing up? And sometimes the response might be, write it up and we'll see. Like, okay, well, shit, let's try it. Now you're going to get a lot of no's that way, but you also might be able to make a deal that way too, especially in the market where you're going to start to see a lot more anxious sellers as people are just kind of being bled out with money right now. It's pretty bad. So yeah, go Reggie.
Yeah, I'll say this about brokers. You're probably going to pay closer to retail because they're not on your side and they're not on the seller side either. They're kind of, I mean, they're an intermediary. It's not like, you have like an agent who's working just for you. It's a slightly different relationship. So always try to keep that in mind. The off market, I mean, you're cutting out so many middlemen by doing that. And so it's usually more things will work, but just remember those brokers, they're good options. They can funnel you quality deals. But it might be a challenge to get it, to really buy right. And, you'll probably pay closer to retail going through a broker than if you don't.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So I don't know. I think maybe we diverted from your question, Chris, but how is important we don't personally spend any time intentionally trying to track down off-market deals. So like I said, in the lesson, sourcing off-market deals is almost another job in itself. However, there are some great systems and tools out there. I will tell you, like, if you're looking for a system to start to leverage, our REI Sift is one that I think is a fantastic tool out there. It specializes what he calls Tyler Austin. He's a friend of mine who owns a company. He specializes in niche sequential marketing. So he focuses on, once you go through a list of sellers, the people that he focuses on is not the ones he's able to access easily, because everyone else can access those people easily. It's the ones that the return to sender or where there's none of the numbers are accurate. He'll focus on the ones that are what everyone else would throw out as bad data. He'll focus on those, and the people who are hard to find, those are the ones where he's finding the deals right now. So but again, that's an entirely different energy source and time constraint that you need to consider if you do want to jump into that. Okay. Leo, you raise your hand, man. I'll let you ask your question while I'm looking up here.
Yeah, sure. So 2-part question on the broker thing, right? So let's say you're underwriting a deal, let's say it's out of state. Do you have like a general talk track of like how you present the verbal to the broker, especially if it's the first time?
Sure. I mean, it's literally just having the conversation with him. So verbally, it's kind of like
Mhm.
I just said, hey, hey Leo, let's say you're the broker. Hey Leo, this is Matt Gardner with with Three Beach Capital. Went over the numbers, man. Thank you so much for sending them my way. I realized, you were assuming in your pro forma, I saw that you were assuming, a 0%. 0% for vacancy going forward. And, that's just not a number I think is realistic. So I had to throw in a 10% vacancy factor, and that's even kind of tight for me. I also saw you were projecting a rent increase of 4% per year. But, looking at, the data we see right now that Fannie Mae is pushing out and everyone else is realizing that it's kind of a softening market right now. I was throwing my numbers at a 2% appreciation for rent. And so, when I get these numbers together with the cap rate, you also assume the cap rates were going to suppress another 1%. I really again, I have a hard time believing the cap rates are going to get any better anytime soon. So I left the cap rates where they are in the current market. Again, thinking that might not even be conservative enough, but I got to this price, man. I would love to make it happen, but is there any way you think your seller would entertain something like that? If so, I'd be happy to write it up. And just kind of, again, justify your point a little bit and then just throw it out.
Gotcha. And do you usually do like the ballpark offer, like a quick 10-second offer and then make a call, or do you do like a full underwrite before like reaching out to the broker?
Before I reach out to the broker, I will do more of a full underwrite because I don't want to talk to him without having details. I use the quick underwriting to determine if it's worth my time to do the full underwrite. So that's kind of the initial filter, sifting out all the ones that aren't even worth my time. But like we were talking about with Chris earlier, like you could make any deal a good deal, right? So like, I don't want to say if it's a bad deal, it doesn't fall out that filter right away, but you'll start to learn just through experience of analyzing a bunch of deals. Like, okay, like he's asking triple what I think I'm going to make. Like, is it likely that he's going to take an offer that's a third of his asking price? Maybe, like he might, but it's very, very unlikely. But if we're close enough, then I'll run the numbers. But yeah, once we run the numbers and do the actual analysis, that's when I can talk to specific numbers, and that's when you can like Reggie showed last week when we were doing the analysis piece. We'll send them our analysis. I'm a filtered version of it, saying, hey man, here's how we're running our numbers, and it's hard. It's hard to refute numbers. It's hard to refute data. They can try to say, oh well, the projections of cap rates are supposed to reduce by another 0.5%. Okay, go man. Like, that's fine. If that's your assumption, I can't get on board with that. So I'm sorry. Like, that's where we differ. And at least we understand how we differ within our methodology there.
Gotcha. Okay. I appreciate that, Matt.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One follow-up. Is there like a filtered or like a list of like the filtered down P&L or like whatever analysis that you would send? Like, I mean, obviously, like we don't send the whole thing, but
Reggie
would
can
you normally
definitely
send?
Reggie can send
Okay.
some of the ones that we sent recently if you want to throw some in
Awesome.
Slack, Reggie. Like one of your examples that you sent recently to the brokers.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Perfect.
drop the Marbella pro forma in Slack. Let me see. Yeah, I usually give them like a pro forma, so all the way from income all the way down through debt service, operating expenses, non-operating expenses. And then I'll do some like high level return stuff. Depending on the broker, I might even share like some high level, like,
Investor side, yeah.
like, yeah, some of the investor side, but it just, that really depends. Has to be a little trust factor there. All right, here we go.
Yeah, he'll drop that in Slack so you get an idea. I mean, it can be as simple as here's my numbers, NOI, cap rate, whatever. You can be just purely text, or you can develop a little pro forma. It's going to be to Reggie's point. Everyone's going to be a little bit unique, so we don't have a standardized product that we don't have like a standardized milked, whatever, weighted down, watered down is the word I'm trying to get, a watered down kind of version that we send to the brokers. It's just everyone's going to be unique the way we talk to them.
Every relationship, is this like a bro dude kind of relationship, or is this like a sir, professional kind of combo?
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. Well, we got time. It's 8 o'clock now and Eastern time. So what do you guys got? We got one more question. We'll field if there's anything else, guys and gals. Not trying to single the ladies out.
Just drop that in Slack.
I think that's it. Oh,
All right.
that.
Paul, you got something?
The thing that
Paul
you,
always has something.
yeah, They said hold the question to the end.
No, you're good. Yeah.
The sample that you all used earlier that had the profiles and stuff like that, is there like a template or something of that sort showing that in the resources?
And say that again.
That's the stand. He's saying the standard Michael Blanc analyzer that has the 4 different scenarios.
No,
Yeah.
not the analyzer. The profile that showed, your pro picture, Josh's picture, Reggie's picture, that template.
Oh, we can create a template for that. That's our investor slide deck. And yeah, Josh can share our investor slide deck. We have a basic slide deck we use, or we should just create one for 3 Beach Capital for the mastermind.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
one already in the, I don't know if it's in the resources tab. I guess it'd be a good place to put it. It's in somewhere in the Google Drive.
Okay.
We have an example pitch deck that we've done before, which is the more updated version than the one that you just saw from Citronelle.
I'm gonna call out Josh in Slack right now to task him to do that over this week. We'll get you guys a template for sure, and we'll throw it in the resources section.
It's
Just
in
trying
there
to find
somewhere.
another
I just
way
have to find it and send it to everybody. Send the link.
Yeah. I'm sure that way it just, before we even find anything, because obviously it sounds like you have such a small window. Once you find a deal, I'd rather have it already typed up like you all said and just say, change the name, change the address,
Yeah.
change whatever, and that way, bam, there it is.
Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, the investor deck doesn't take a long time because you've done all the work. It's really just kind of pulling it together for the investor pitch deck. Or for the lender as well. If you're going to throw the bio, you should have your bio document ready to go for sure. Then you can just copy and paste into whatever you use.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is that what you were talking about, Paul? You were talking about the pitch deck, or you were talking about the LOI?
Yeah. The pitch deck.
Yeah, I'll find it somewhere in there. I'll send the link in Slack to everybody.
Cool. Awesome, guys. Well, I know today wasn't a super in-depth conversation, and it was more of a one-way conversation today, but we just really felt it was important to hopefully get this high-level overview. You get an idea for what we're going to be talking about next week. Next week I won't be here, so it'll be Josh and Reggie running the show for next week. But I hope you guys, I hope it starts to put the puzzle pieces together a little bit more. Sometimes you lose the forest through the trees, right? And so you get so focused on one aspect, you forget how it kind of incorporates into the big picture deal. And so as we go into next week, just kind of bring your questions with the bigger picture in mind, and we'll hopefully build the puzzle together and find some deals, guys.